Welcome back to the Survivor Global show. As always, you've got myself and Riley here to break everything down with you guys for episodes 16 and 17 of Survivor South Africa, Island of Secrets. So we have a really interesting start to the game here, Riley, where Steffi goes back home and she goes back to camp after this tribal council, and she's been in tribal council, and at tribal council she's received 2 votes here coming her way, and she is pretty angry, saying that who made Rob the manager of votes and sort of made him decide who gets votes coming their way. And she declares that it's now on, there's going to be war between her and Rob moving forward. And this is the part of the game that me as a fan, I really enjoy. You know, when you get these alliances that have stuck together the whole game, they were so tight. And that's what I used to love about Final Twos back in the day, because you had these Final 3 deals that needed to be broken. But obviously we still get this here because there's 3 players that have worked together this whole game together now. And there's certain factions of these 3 that are starting to break off now and deciding that they're done with Rob.
Yeah, that's right. It's not just a war. It's going to be a silent war for Steffi. Obviously, she's starting to recognize that Rob is, really in charge here. He's calling all the shots. And at this point, I mean, he's got all the tricks in his bag. He's got the idols. He's got, obviously, the strength to win all the physical individual immunity challenges as well. So he really is controlling the game. And, we start to see that Steffi is really starting to go against Rob and want to propose another deal, especially having been blindsided in that last tribal council where Jark went home. She's starting to feel as though her place in the tribe isn't as secure as she thought, and that perhaps the Amigos aren't really this strong bond that would carry through to the final 3 as she would have thought. But Nicole, on the other hand, though, the other Amigo there, she feels completely safe in her alliance. She implicitly trusts Rob no matter what, and she almost seems to not worry about anyone at this point because she feels as though there's no fractures within the all of 3, and they're almost going to go to the end together without any strategic conniving from people like Steffi and the others. And she almost feels like it's assured that they'll go to the final 3 at this point. But obviously with Steffi going against Rob at this point in the game, it's a war against Rob right now.
Yeah, and one of the things that stood out for me here is that one of the things that Rob does extremely well whenever he betrays anybody in his group, I don't know if I should call it an alliance because it's kind of a group that he has there, he does go against them and then always covers his own tracks extremely well by talking to them and saying, hey, I had a reason for why I needed to do this to you in the previous tribal council. So he goes to her here and he says, I needed to target you because I didn't want there to be 3 potential targets. I wanted to narrow down where the potential votes were going to go so I could save you in that sense that, I could use the idol. The argument didn't make 100% sense for me here. And clearly this is not working on Steffi as well because she sees through this and doesn't really believe what he's saying. But I do take my hat off to Rob because he's been doing this throughout the whole game. And on most people, it seems to work, but he doesn't really have a good argument to bring Steffi back to his side at this point in the game.
Yeah, that's definitely something that Rob has done better than anyone else, is really just bringing everyone in and creating those so strong social relationships. We saw that earlier in the season with the Spit Shake 7, and obviously he betrayed the likes of Jark and Corvus there. But even in rallying people like Jarrell obviously has so much trust in Rob, as we'll discuss later this episode, surrounding Mike and his plans to get rid of Rob. Jarrell really is not prepared to go against Rob at all at this stage, even though he doesn't realize that he's not a part of his final 3 plans. So you mentioned earlier in our coverage this season how Rob really has all these parachutes in place, and he has lots of options so that if one relationship falls out, he can always fall back on others. And he's got plenty of options at this point in the game. And I'm honestly surprised it's taken this long to really get a lot of resistance against him. At this point, it seems that Mike and Steffi are the only ones that are really questioning how strong Rob is in the game right now. Whereas, previously, no one has really questioned him at all, other than maybe someone like Jark or Dante. So to see that Rob has really got a free passage up to what is now the final 6 in the game is just ridiculous, knowing that he's just this huge physical threat and this great social player. It really does speak to just how good of a game he is playing at this point.
Yeah, you bring up a valid point, and something where I'm going to jump forward into both the tribal councils a little bit here because I want to address the jury. We see the jury in both of these tribal councils laugh at Mike and Darrell, laugh at Darrell because they're not getting it and all these kind of things. Oh, you guys are fools. How didn't you get it? But weren't they all fooled by Rob? Like, I just don't understand it. Like, it's almost like when you watch from the sideline, like we're watching right now, it's easy to make the right calls. It's easy to criticize those that are in the game. But at some point, you also need to look at yourself, unless you're Jacques or Dante on that jury. And you've got to say, we were all fooled by Rob at some stage in the game. So I felt like, in my opinion, it's a little bit disrespectful to those that are still in the game, because they weren't that much smarter than the people that were still in the game at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Jacques and Dante are probably the only ones that haven't been fooled by Rob, although even Jacques, he was betrayed in that Spit Shake 7. So he was betrayed to some extent. Mamba being the other one, though, that probably wasn't too blindsided by Rob, just because she didn't have that connection there. But yeah, this is a big episode for the final 6. Obviously, we know that the family visit is coming up after last episode when Gina visited the Island of Secrets with Steffi, and Steffi going into this challenge, she says she's going to come in guns blazing, and that someone's going to be coming home crying to Manu Malo camp. So she's really prepared to, really cut ties and be ruthless at this point in the game. And we really are starting to see Steffi in these last couple of episodes, and this episode in particular. She's really starting to come out of a shell and really trying to attack Rob and try and become this power player in the game. I do fear, though, it is a bit too late in the season, as we'll see when we go to the reward challenge and discuss that with Rob's dominance in the game. It is a little bit too late. But yeah, we do see that the final 6 all get their loved ones come out. And Steffi, obviously, with Gina, I think it was a little bit of editing magic there, with Rob giving these sideways looks to Steffi, thinking, has she seen Gina before? Because there wasn't as much emotion there. I think more so that's a lot of editing magic there, though, and trying to play up as though it's going to be a big factor later in the episode.
I just want to add to that, Steffi having some tears there is her way of showing emotion. She comes across as this person that's very much got a stonewall face at all times. So I feel like for her tearing up is a big deal, because I don't think the type of person that Steffi is in real life, that she is someone that shows her emotions very often. I just think she's quite a strong woman, quite a strong female, and someone that sort of keeps that close to her chest. I also want to touch on what you mentioned there with Steffi probably turning on Rob a little bit later in the game. I don't blame her for it, because I think we're kind of results focused at the moment. It's probably a good position, because I've got to be honest, even for me, like, I know you're a massive Mike Fenter fan. You told me the other day that Mike Fenter is your favorite international Survivor player of all time, which I was quite shocked to hear, because in my mind, Mike didn't really, and I mean, Mike, if you ever hear this, it's nothing against you. The TV show didn't show me that you were playing the game that much. You were in the shadows quite a lot. But looking at it again this time around, I feel like her and Mike both had the same idea. They just didn't find a way to work together. And you've got to give them credit that they were wanting to make those moves. In Mike's case, he probably just didn't have the social capital to pull it off. In Steffi's case, she just lost the social capital probably this round. Like you said, it's probably 1 or 2 rounds too late. But again, how were they to know that these last couple of challenges were all going to play in Rob's favor and Rob was going to win so many immunities? Because up until this point, winning 5 immunities in a season is a completely new record in Survivor South Africa. There hasn't really been that many challenge beasts that have just completely dominated the end game here. So I don't blame Steffi and Mike too much this time around when I'm looking at the game. I do want to move to the family visit, though. We get quite a few different people coming here. It's beautiful to see it. Obviously Josie, Rob's mother, she comes out there, and we learn that she's a Comrades runner. Clearly she puts that skills as being an athlete to use here, because she helps him win this family reward in the end of the day here. And they really blew the rest of the competition out of the way. I think another shout out that we have to give here, and sort of an honorable mention, has to go to Leandre, who is Letitia's daughter, who also did an extremely good job in getting Letitia into that second place. But then sadly, it was never going to favor Letitia at the end, having to have a good throwing arm and knock those pins off the crate that they needed to knock it off there at the end. So Rob does end up winning this, and now Rob has got to make a very difficult decision. That's why I love these kind of rewards where you've got to choose now, who are you going to take with you? And I thought they did this brilliantly, because they've got to choose 2 people to come with them on the reward, and have the family ones come to camp with them and have that food. But they also have to choose 1 person to go to the Island of Secrets, which at this point in the game, you would think is the worst thing possible that could happen to you in the final 6, not to be there with someone when there's this few numbers left in the game who you can socialize and strategize with. And 2 people are going to go pissed off sorry, it's going to be 3 people going to the Island of Secrets. It's going to be Doral, it's going to be Mike, and it's going to be Nicole. So Rob's choice here is to have Letitia, who he says doesn't have a lot of time on Earth yet, to spend some time with her daughters, which gets a bit of a reaction on the jury, which we'll talk about later on because she's only 50. And then also a person who's the most hungry out on the island at the moment, the person who just went to Island of Secrets a day or 2 ago, is also going to go with him to this reward. And he's going to put Nicole there with Doral and Mike, but he makes a strategic move in putting him there. How did you feel about Rob's decision overall at this stage of the game? And also, do you like sort of the configuration that they have here with putting 3 people on the Island of Secrets? And
Letitia to have time with her loved one was obviously a no-brainer at that point. And also, Rob wanted to build a bit of a relationship with her as well. It only serves in his benefit. And I think it was the easy choice where if Letitia gets time with her loved one, no one is going to be mad at all. The Steffi and Nicole decision, though, I think ultimately for Rob's game, it was the best decision to take Steffi with him on the family visit, purely because we know at least that Steffi is starting to plant seeds to go against him. And what we'll see when we go to the Island of Secrets is that the 3 on the island don't get to go back to camp, so they don't get that strategic time to go back and really make waves. And sending Nicole there to the Island of Secrets, Nicole is someone that Rob trusts no matter what, and he knows that she won't go against him. And honestly, I think if Nicole did plot to get rid of Rob, he honestly wouldn't be that mad, because I think he really does cherish Nicole as a great friend and wants her to succeed in the game just as much as he wants to succeed in the game. So I think it is the best choice to take Nicole to the Island of Secrets, even though realistically, I'm sure Nicole would have preferred to obviously have that loved one's visit, just knowing how emotional and passionate she is, and having kids back at home as well will be an important factor there. I do think, though, from a strategic point of view, having Nicole there to kind of buffer Mike's strategic chops is probably the best decision for Rob's game. But yeah, we do get the 3, Mike, Doral, and Nicole on the Island of Secrets there, to give them a little bit of time to strategize. Obviously, we know up to this point, Mike has really been gunning for Rob, but now with Rob having immunity around his neck, he starts to realize that maybe we need to go against Steffi at this point, because Steffi's, again, Rob's right-hand man, he perceives, and someone that's strong in challenges as well.
Yeah, but it is quite interesting because a lot of the conversation that is happening on this island is still Mike targeting Rob quite a lot throughout this conversation, even though Rob is not eligible to be voted out in this round. And again, Nicole sort of lets us know that she thinks it's Mike's time to go because she realizes that Mike is only going to go, only going to gun for Rob, and they don't need that person in there that's going to go against the person that she's the closest with in regards to allies out there on the beach. Another thing here that is quite interesting is that we very clearly see that strategy from Rob worked, because Nicole and Doral, they go and talk separately after Mike have spoken to both of them, and they just said, listen, we got to keep Mike in check. He's completely against Rob at this stage. So Doral being the other person, I don't even know if Rob realized how much he could trust Doral, because Doral was kind of playing this game for Rob at this stage as well.
But I think at this point as well, Mike even acknowledged that it was so hard to get Doral on board, because he's tried many, many times to get Doral on his side to get rid of Rob. But obviously it hasn't worked up until this point. And it really seems that Nicole is probably the most receptive to this plan to at least blindside Steffi. Obviously, Nicole was wanting to get her out at that last tribal council where Jark ultimately went home. And I think Nicole does view Steffi as a bit of a threat. And we'll see a lot of that play out in the next episode as well. But also going back to the family visit with Letitia, she flat out just blurts it out that she has an idol. And Steffi goes to Letitia and says, maybe that wasn't the best move to make, because now everyone knows you have an idol, and at some point you're going to have to play it. And obviously we know that Letitia, Steffi, and Nicole have this pact to go to the final 3 together, all women. And Steffi feels as though that might be, that might put Letitia at jeopardy now, because now that Rob knows they have an idol, it really limits their chance to blindside him later down the line.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just going to touch back on the Nicole conversation where you said that Nicole was willing to cut Steffi. I'm not going to say you're outright wrong, but I do question that a little bit because she mentions to Mike in that final tribal council that you never had anyone and that you never really had anyone that were willing to make these moves with you. She point blank admits that to him. So I don't know if she was ever really going to entertain Mike's ideas, but I think that one of the things we have to give Nicole credit for is clearly she made Mike believe that she was a number with him throughout of the game. And that's why Mike was comfortable to stay with this alliance for as long as he did, and he never tried to flip earlier because he thought he had other options if he needed to take out King Rob at a later stage in the game. I do agree with you 100% on Letitia telling them about the idol. It's very strange to me. Clearly in these 2 episodes, we see that Letitia's closest person that she's working the closest with at this stage in the game is Steffi. So it makes sense that she was going to tell Steffi at some stage that she had an idol, but telling Rob this as well just gives Rob more information. He's had all the information throughout the game, but now he can put contingency plans in place for how they need to work that out of the game in the next round. And the next round is going to be an interesting one because there's going to be so many idols at play and an individual immunity at play. So we'll get into that on that episode. But overall, questionable move, definitely here to let Rob know what's going on. But you do see that Steffi and Letitia start talking about the fact that they'll go for Mike here next. And then after Mike, Rob is the person that they realize they need to get out of the game because Steffi is well aware that Rob is playing the best game at this point, and he'll probably win if no one takes him out prior to that spot. We move into back at the camp area. Sorry, we move into the tribal council area. Or no, where was it? Yeah, straight to the tribal council from Island of Secrets. I was confused. I felt like I missed something here in my notes. Like there was supposed to be a camp section, but then I realized it was straight from doing that and having the 2 teams split straight to tribal council.
Yeah, and yes. That does speak to how strong this alliance is, though, in the fact that they didn't have the opportunity to go back to tribal, but this plan to get rid of Mike was basically set in stone. I mean, Nicole and Jarrell were basically on board with it. Obviously, we'll see that Jarrell's vote goes elsewhere in the end there, but he was, he knew that Mike was the one to go. So it does speak to just how strong of a game Rob's playing and how good those alliances are, that really there wasn't too much resistance. I do think it does play to Mike's disadvantage there because, I mean, unless really he had an idol or something to play, with only 3 people on the Island of Secrets, there really wasn't too much room to move and perhaps make a counter plan and move against when there's 3 on one island and 3 on the other. So there's not too many opportunities to move there. But we do see that Nicole really calls out Rob and says she was extremely pissed off that she didn't get to go to the island, that she was sent to the Island of Secrets because she has kids at home. She hasn't had that opportunity to be with her husband at this point in the game. And Steffi at this point has had plenty of chances to be nourished as well. And Rob's reason to say that Steffi has had the least amount of nourishment, that's been used many, many times in this game, I think, so much to the point where she's probably had more nourishment than anyone else. So it really is kind of bullshit. And I think Nicole is right in calling him out for that.
Yeah, 100%. The only thing that's been used more often than the whole she hasn't had much nourishment has been it's an idol that we were going to use for us. That's the only thing that is being used more often in this game that I find really funny. And we'll talk about that in the next episode for sure when that starts coming back up. But the one thing, yeah, she calls him out here. Obviously, Rob is quite uncomfortable throughout this whole tribal council. You can see that for the first time, his gears are spinning because he doesn't know what happened on the Island of Secrets while he wasn't there. So he quite rightfully asks Nicole here, he says, can I ask you a question? And he asks her in front of everybody in the tribal council, what happened in the Island of Secrets? Is there something that I need to know about? Is there something that I need to plan for? Because in Rob's mind, I think at this point in the game, he's thinking that there's potentially an idol or a game-changing twist that happened on the Island of Secrets. So if they continue to vote for Mike, like what is the plan? What did Mike potentially get? Did he get to also go up against these 3 or 2 people to get another thing there that he needs to account for now in the vote? So it's an interesting question, but Nicole takes this wrong. She thinks that Rob is actually questioning her loyalty, which isn't like clearly Rob never questions Nicole's loyalty. Even in the next episode, we'll talk about the fact that he was completely snowed by her and completely thought throughout the whole couple of days that he was out there on the reward and everything with her that she always had his back. But it's a really interesting thing because he wanted to know this before he puts the target on Mike. And then straight after her saying, yes, I've got you, he then tells Mike point blank, I know that you've been coming after me for the last week, and Mike can only fist bump him and laugh and say, well played. since you found out. But at this point, Mike is finding out that he doesn't have the alliance members that he thought he had, because clearly the people that he thought he had in his pocket, the people that were going to go work with him, like the Durows and the Nicoles, actually took all that information to Rob. That's why Rob has known this for so long. And that's when Nicole says, and I want to finish with this thing here, because Mike said a couple of games ago, Survivor is like playing the game with a sniper rifle, and you've only got a set amount of bullets in your chamber, and you've got to choose when you shoot them. I agree with him 100%. That is how Survivor is. But he found out that he had a bunch of blank bullets in his gun when it came to actually having to pull the trigger in this case.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, touching back on the Nicole thing, I think it was kind of just the way that Rob directed the question at her. He did seem very controlling in that moment. And I think that is what maybe annoyed Nicole a little bit. Rob does call out Mike and says he's obviously been trying to get rid of him the whole time. And we also see that when Mike says that it's crystal clear at this point that all the final three are going all the way to the end together, it really does shake Jarrell a little bit. And I think Jarrell starts to recognize that his alliance with Rob really isn't as strong as he thought. And we do see that Jarrell, when the votes play out, we see that Jarrell kind of backpedals and doesn't vote for Mike in the end. Instead, he votes for Steffi and throws that vote against her. And I mean, while obviously staying loyal to Rob throughout, it does show that perhaps his assurances with Rob aren't as strong as he first thought, because we do know that I believe Nicole, Jarrell, and Rob had a final three in place. So that was really what Jarrell was banking on at this stage. And there still is a path for Jarrell to the final three, with 5 people left in the game, and Steffi starting to go against Rob as well. But yeah, it did seem that he was a little bit shaken by Mike's comments there.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because Jarrell spoke about the fact that the vote was going to be on Steffi the whole time while they were on the Island of Secrets. He was convinced. He even told Mike a few times, don't worry, the vote's not coming your way. Rob is voting for Steffi. So that makes me believe that he was told by Rob that it would be Steffi. And clearly he was out of the loop when he got into Tribal Council. He didn't realize the plan had shifted since then. And I don't think that was ever truly the plan, because we find out in the next episode that Rob never really wanted to turn against any of the Amigos if he didn't have to, right? So it's interesting, but Mike is voted out. He becomes the 8th member of the jury. What would be your eulogy for Mike in this game? Why did you gravitate towards Mike so much? Why did you like him and sort of put him on that pedestal as the player that you love that plays International Survivor? Because, I mean, it's big words coming from an Australian to say that when you've got such big characters on the Australian Survivor show.
Yeah, I will say Mike is probably on par with Shonny for me from Australian Survivor, obviously, as one of my favourites there. But no, I respected that Mike was willing to play such a strategic game, but he didn't really get too many opportunities to play hard. And I feel like he did better. He obviously went further in the game than Jark by not being overt and playing too over the top, too aggressive. But obviously, I mean, in the end, I think the fact that no one was really playing this season other than Rob and Jark, it kind of did disadvantage Mike a little bit in that there was really no one that was willing to make moves against Rob. That does speak to just how good of a player Rob has been, though, throughout this season. He's really minimising his chances of going home by just making sure he is in cahoots with everyone, and he's got a relationship with everyone in the game, such to the point that someone like Mike, despite how hard he tries to get someone like Jarrell on side, no one is really going against Rob at this stage. And it really does blow my mind at this point. I know Rob has won a lot of individual immunities as well, but the fact that he's gotten to this point so far without anyone except for Steffi, Jark, and Mike, unsuccessfully, might I say, lobbying against him. The fact he's gone this far in the game without really getting too much resistance to him is just, it really is crazy to think about. This strong physical threat and also social threat getting to this point in the game without any marks against him is, shocking to my mind.
Now, I want to touch on that because you bring up a valid point. So I want to touch on two things. I'll start off by finishing off the Mike part and my thoughts on Mike. I think that Mike, being 21 years, I think he was 20 years old maybe when he played the game. He was very young. Playing this game, he was easily left astray by people who had more life experience than him in this game. I would be very interested because I feel like he had good instincts. He had good plans. He just didn't have the social capital to actually play them and make those moves happen. I would be interested to see what he does in a second go around if he gets another opportunity down the line. And, if we see like a 28-year-old Mike or a 30-year-old Mike come back, because he's still so young, he could come back. Doesn't need to be the next All-Stars, could be the one after that fall, we know. I would like to see that. I think that he's got more to give. I also want to touch on Rob. You mentioned here that nobody went against Rob and Rob's won all these challenges. To me, it's always interesting how we penalize certain people, certain Survivor winners that win a lot of immunities to get to the end and win. But Rob doesn't get penalized in the same way as other winners that we have seen in the past win their way to the end. And with this second episode, I will be as bold as to say I'm pretty convinced Rob would have been a gone burger if it wasn't for the fact that he won that immunity. I think Nicole was ready to pull the trigger on him. And we'll talk about the fact that she flip-flops at the end to go back to him. But I really think that he needed that win.
Well, yeah, absolutely he needed that win. But, I mean, he does have the idol, as we know, and we'll discuss later, just how that tribal council plays out, which I really want to dive into that one later because, four idols, I think it was, four immunities being played there out of 5 people is just ridiculous and harks back to those nightmarish days of Survivor Game Changers Final 6. Going back to camp, we come back from Final Tribal Council and it's Steffi that, goes back to the Amigos and says, yep, we're going all the way, no matter what. Contrary to what Steffi is really thinking in her head, she's just solidifying that plan with Rob and Nicole and really just cementing that trust. I do think that Steffi at this point feels a little bit insecure in her position in the game. She's got votes against her at that Jark Tribal Council. And then again, Jarrell has voted against her here as well. So I do think she's a little bit uncertain of where she stands in the game at the moment and does want that reassurance from Nicole and Rob and just try to pander them to a little bit and say, I'm here with you to the end no matter what. Keep me. We've got to get rid of Jarrell at this point. And it does seem as though Jarrell is becoming this next target now. And that, Rob really does believe at this point is going to be the Amigos Final 3.
No, 100%. Now, what's interesting to me is, like you quite rightfully say here, Steffi is scrambling. She gets Letitia and Nicole together. I believe it was at the well at night while they're talking. And Nicole tells them about everything that she has. So she says, hey, here's Nathan's idol. Here's my idol. You guys didn't realize that I had an idol in my possession. But the reason that I didn't tell you guys about it was because I wanted to use this idol for us. That's why I didn't tell you that I had an idol, because I wanted to use, Riley, this idol for us. I mean, if somebody came to you with that, would you believe that? Because to me, it's such a weak source excuse for not having told them about the idol a week, 2 weeks ago.
This is what I don't understand about the Sa'ula tribe, dating all the way back to our first episode when we had Leanne and Paul on there. The fact that Paul found the idol, shared it with the tribe, and it really has been this recurring theme for the Sa'ula tribe in that their trust is so ingrained that they're willing to share this idol for the tribe, and it seems as though no one is really going against anyone in that tribe at this point. And it really does seem like a very unified tribe, which goes completely against Survivor, and it almost harks back to the days of Tuggy and Survivor Borneo, where everyone just thought they were all best friends. It really is bizarre. It really is bizarre that they've gotten this far in the game without anyone really throwing shade against each other. The fact that Steffi hasn't brought up the fact to Jarrell and Letitia that Rob has the idol, Nicole has the idol. We need to get them out at this point. It's just absurd this tribal mentality from Sa'ula all the way through the game has been, this is for us. We're going to the end together. No one is going against the tribe. We're really going to go Sa'ula strong all the way to the end. It really is crazy that they've gone this far in the game together. No one's loyalty has wavered really.
Yeah, it's crazy. And if somebody came to me and said, listen, the reason I didn't tell you about this for 2 weeks is because I wanted to use it for us, I would question, if you truly wanted to use it for us, you would have told me 2 weeks ago. So I would not trust that person. And we do see Letitia here going to Steffi separately and saying, hey, it's a little bit suspect, because obviously Letitia is not born yesterday. She's a bit older. She's a bit wiser. She said, this is a bit weird that she's only coming to you with this now. But at this point, it does look like Nicole is firmly on board here with Letitia and Steffi to have a women's strong final 3 to go to the end.
Yeah, and Nicole sort of says to them as well, we have to talk at this point. We can't talk at any other point until we get to tribal council, because if we're seen talking together, the 3 of us, it's going to put a target on our back. And Rob's going to realize, with him having an idol, that he might be at risk here. So it might alert him to the plan, and one of us could be at jeopardy. So it is important that they don't talk too much. I also think that that assertion by Nicole also gives her a little bit more security as well, because it says, don't come to me after tribal council, because obviously if Rob gets immunity and they're going back to her and making it look as though these three women together, then it will go against her, and Rob might question whether Nicole was truly loyal to him. But yeah, we do say that Rob goes back to Nicole and really apologizes to her for not taking her to the island of secret. Yeah, it really is crazy. I mean, he's just so commanding, so convincing. And he does say to Nicole, I trust you so much. That's why I sent you to the island of secrets, because I know that even if I didn't take you, you would still have my back no matter what. And he says,
and there's some psychology. I want to add to that. There's some psychology behind that. If you use a reverse psychology in someone and you say, hey, Riley, I trust you so much that I'm going to let you in on this. Riley, I trust you. That's why I want you to do this. Automatically, we as people want to trust people who trust us. You gravitate subconsciously to people. And that's the thing about Rob and the way that he plays this game. He plays it at a deeper psychological level than what most people are able to play this game. And it is truly a masterclass that we're seing play out here.
Yeah, and that's the point I want to get to is Rob says to Nicole that I want you to win the game just as much as I want myself to win. You know, I'm not here for the financial compensation. I want to see someone that I think deserves it to win. And he does say to Nicole there that, yeah, I want you to win the game, and that's why I trust you so much. And you're right, it is that little bit of reverse psychology. I think a lot of it is truth in that Rob
I think it's true.
I think Rob does like Nicole that much. And yeah, I don't think he wants the prize if he feels as though someone is more deserving. But then again, yeah, it is a little bit of strategy in there as well. I mean, you can't deny that as well. But no, he has been so commanding just in how he controls everyone. He hasn't come across as threatening like someone like Boston Rob is in season like Redemption Island, but he's still managed to control everyone. Really, I think more so through being buddies with everyone than actually, using 100%. Fear and intimidation.
He does use fear and intimidation at certain points when he gets into the tribal councils, when he says to people, let's not stray from the plan because you'll be the next target. Definitely has it, but he's got a Boston Rob is like a blunt object that runs against the wall, but he does it in a way where he does it with finesse. He kills you with kindness, but he still comes across as intimidating while he's being this gentle, kind soul, which is different. It's almost more like, I do think Rob has got some crazy skills when it comes to that. But I also wanted to say, him saying that, I trust you and all these kind of things and making these excuses the next day, he's definitely legitimate to Nicole in a big way. And I do believe that he would fall on the sword quite happily for Nicole, which was one of the things the first time I watched it I didn't like. I want winners to be out there to go and win the money, not want other people to potentially win it, but I appreciate it and I admire that he's at that level. The big thing is Rob does this with everyone, not just Nicole. So he knows what he's doing. He's got the strategy down pat. It's worked for him since day one, and he's doing this in and out. But I want to go into the challenge here. So we go into the challenge. We find out that it's going to be a lunch, a picnic. They're going to go on the beach and see some bats. They have also, the winner will also be able to choose who goes to the Island of Secrets, and they can take some person to go there with them. And the challenge that they have is the one where you've got the poles with a platform on it and you've got to put a goblet on it. And this normally favors the men because you've got to have some strong upper body strength, some strong arms. Like Nicole says at the end, she couldn't beat the arms that Rob has in this challenge because you need some strong arms to be able to keep that up there. And Rob blows everybody out of the competition. Honorable mention to Nicole. She did a really good job there to be the last female standing and really pushing him for it, but she doesn't win it. Now, a lot of what happens here on the reward on the beach for me, Riley, is quite interesting because, Nicole is also a great manipulator. And in fact, I think she's one of the best manipulators in the game. I think she's an extremely good game player. And here we see how dangerous she can be because she knows that Rob is the target. She knows Rob needs to go next. She's already turned against him. And she talks about the fact that, if we go into the next tribal council, how cool would it be if we all walked in there with the hidden immunity idols around our neck? Because she also tells him about Letitia having the idol, or he knows, she tells him that she's in on it. So all of them go in there with the idols, but she then uses a brilliant thing here and she says, how cool would it be if we didn't play it because we trusted each other so much? How cool would the jury think this was going to be? Now, there's two things I want to address here, Riley. Firstly, if I was the jury sitting there and people flaunted this in front of my face to say, how cool are we together? We're not even needing to use this idol. I think it would leave a sour taste in my mouth as a jury member, you flaunting your alliance in my face that way. I don't think it would be perceived in the way that Nicole thinks it's going to be perceived at this point. That's point number one I wanted to make. Point number two I wanted to make is that this is super dangerous because she's got that knife out there for Rob and she's ready to go for him. And I feel like, Rob ends up being one of the best winners we've ever seen. How different would this world have been if he did not win this immunity and he actually listened to Nicole in this? He could have gone from being one of the best to being the Eric of Survivor South Africa.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Rob does convinces Rob not to play his idol at Tribal Council, and we'll see all the members discuss how they're going to use the idols at the next Tribal Council later in the episode there. Nicole does do a good job in sort of making sure that Rob feels assured, so that if he doesn't win the immunity challenge, he can look good to the jury, and perhaps she can pull off a massive blindside. I don't think Rob is the type of player, though, to take chances like that, especially at this point in the game when you've only got we're down to 5 members now. So, I mean, if you're not going to play your idol at the final 5, I mean, you've got to be foolish, especially knowing how big of an immunity threat you are as well. I know he does feel assured in his position with Steffi, Nicole, and Jarrell. But I mean, if I was at the final 5, even if I had those strong alliances, if you've got an idol, you've got to play it. I mean, you can't be that bullish at this point. I think that'd just be completely foolish, especially to wear it around your neck. We've seen it in the past with people like Yule in the Cook Islands, but I just don't think it would play off as well when you know that there are people that might go against you. And there are other idols in the game as well. So it's something to really play up. I don't think Rob, in the end, had that happened, I think he would have played the idol, to be honest. So I just don't think he would have felt as assured of his position in the game, especially knowing that Letitia and Nicole have idols as well.
Yeah, so I think what would have been interesting here, Riley, is that if Letitia or Nicole played their idols, I think, 100% Rob also immediately plays his idol. But Nicole is smart here because she's saying none of us will be playing our idols. And that shows trust. And I actually, between me and you, I'm going to disagree. And I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I'll ask Rob this question when we interview him because I've never heard any of the interviews. I don't know if he's addressed this question before. But the edit definitely made it look like he was completely snowed by Nicole at this point. I mean, to the point where he said he would gladly fall on his sword for Nicole. So I hear what you're saying. We've got to remember that Rob's not a Survivor's enthusiast like us who have seen 40 seasons of this to see how every iteration of Survivor played out. I don't know if he preempted the possibility of Nicole going against it. And I still think it shows because he had no idea Steffi turned against him until Nicole's goes to him later in the game to say, hey, Steffi's coming for you. And he is shocked. You can see the look on his face. It's true shock. He couldn't believe that anybody would want to turn against them at this point.
Even before the reward challenge, though, we did get a confessional from Rob saying he was concerned because he couldn't predict anything that would happen in the game. So I do feel at this point, I think he recognises that there's so few people left. And there are chances, especially knowing that people like Mike have been throwing his name out, I think he is a little bit concerned as to where he stands. It would be interesting to hear Rob's thoughts on that and actually whether he would have not played his idol had things turned out as Nicole had proposed. But on the other side of the game, we have Letitia going to the Island of Secrets for the first time, obviously. Rob choosing to send her there. She's the only one at this point that hasn't been there. A shocking decision not to take Steffi because, I mean, Steffi's been there so few times there at this point. But no, Letitia gets the vote nullifier, which she can use up until the final 4, which will be a useful tool for Letitia later in the game. I wonder what you think about that one.
Yeah, I want to add, for me, it's hilarious to think that Letitia gets sent there one time and immediately she gets an advantage. Steffi's been there like 8 or 9 times already, like I don't know how many times, 6 times, in the game, and she's still yet to receive a really valuable advantage. To me, putting the vote nullifier in the game so late at the final 5, and then you can use it in the final 4, I think it's a bit overpowering. Luckily, in this case, it didn't work in the favor of the producers. I don't know if they thought it was like. I can't see in my mind. I can't make a case for this being a good thing to have this strong of an advantage so late in the game.
Yeah, I do not like any new idols or advantages being introduced after the final six. I feel as though after the final seven, that's your last chance to play, or the final six is your last chance to play an idol. I feel like after the final 7 or 8, there shouldn't be any more idols or advantages floating around in camp, because it does incentivize people to go for a late run. And yeah, we will discuss the tribal council and the idol fiasco later in the episode, I'm sure. But yeah, it is a bit odd for Letitia to be getting a vote nullifier this late in the game. And honestly, I don't think it helps her too much, though, because she doesn't really have an alliance at this point. So it really isn't going to really amount to too much in the end there. But I mean, yeah, we do get another advantage.
I want to add to that. Yeah, I want to add to that. So it doesn't help Letitia, because we know that the next person that's going to get voted out is the only person she's really got a really strong alliance with, and her and Doral. We find out at the tribal council they've never spoken to each other, because Doral, or I think it could have been it was this tribal council where, Letitia claims that she's the fourth amigo, and she says that if you asked me where I was lying, no, it was the previous vote. It was with Mike and Doral. Mike and Doral were asking Letitia where she's lying, and they're like, she said, you've never asked me. So they've never had game conversations with Letitia up until this point. So Letitia is not going to work with a Doral. So if she's not going to work with Doral, they can't take out Nicole if Rob wins that final immunity, for instance. So she's really in a bad spot here with an advantage that's not going to help her. But I still feel like this advantage in the wrong person's hands can completely ruin. And what do I mean by the wrong person? I mean the right person. Imagine like a Dirty Harry or someone that's super capable getting an advantage like this at the end, like Jark or somebody. I feel like there's a lot of possibilities for how this game could have turned out differently with a different set of people out there that gets this advantage. So I agree with you. We don't want to see these types of advantages this late in the game. Now, I also want to touch on at camp, we had Doral and Steffi being there. This is not really a strategy moment, but just really funny to see Doral out there, never having held a chicken before. He's been out there for as long as he has. And he's not the one that mans up to kill the chicken. Steffi gets the machete out and she does the job. I just want to say Steffi as a whole this season for me has been a great character and also a great player, because she realized, similar to Mike, when she needed to make the move, she's been you'd say in a better position than Mike up until this point, because she's actually had more Alliance members that wanted to work with her. The only problem is she didn't realize how loyal those Alliance members at the end would be to a Rob and the rest of that big group. Now, we do have a period here where it's pre-immunity. Steffi talks to Nicole on the beach while they're washing pans and cutting coconuts. Rob's sleeping in the shelter. He's still asleep. They have a chat and they're like, okay, Rob can't win this next immunity. We're going to turn against Rob. That's the way that we need to go. And they want to make sure, best case scenario, Rob doesn't win. But if he does win, Doral's going to be out. That's basically the plan going into this immunity challenge. Now, the immunity challenge is each member needs to rush into a maze and then find puzzle pieces, and then they have to put this puzzle together at the end. And it's that famous puzzle where Michelle has done this twice, and then she kicks it over both times, and signature Michelle sort of ways at the end of Winners at War and also in her own season. And she's won that quite convincingly. And it's really funny here because, going into this challenge, they kind of set it up like Nicole's going to win it, because Rob speaks to Nicole saying, hey, if it's a puzzle or if it's anything with memory, you're going to have to be the one that pulls it off. But what I liked about this challenge, Riley, is it doesn't just require great puzzle skills to be able to put it together. It also requires stamina, endurance for you to go out there and run. And even though Steffi and Nicole is working together here to try and get those pieces, Rob's just that much faster than all of them, and he gets to the puzzle before them, which basically means he ends up blowing it and doing a win here that nobody expected.
Yeah, but we do see Nico really lauds Letitia for her effort as well, for really running the whole time and giving it her all. But you're right, it has a lot of different components. Obviously, the puzzle part of it, the stamina part of it, and also navigating the maze as well is another big part of it. But yeah, no, Rob, at this point, he almost seems unstoppable. And when we go back to camp, it really does seem as though Doral is down and out. It looks like he's going to be the one to go at this next tribal council. And we see that the Romanian four, the Amigos and Letitia, all come together, all knowing they have idols between them to spare. And they really concoct up this massive plan where they're going to go in and all play their idols for themselves. They're going to come in with immunity idols around their necks and really, show how strong they are, and that Doral will be the one to go. But I think it is it's Nicole that actually says that no, perhaps we all pull them out, and Rob gives Steffi the idol, and Steffi really doesn't like this idea at all. She really goes against this and says, I don't want Rob looking like he's controlling my game. I'm not there for that. And she really doesn't want it to look as though Rob is in control of her at this point.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, again, like I said, it's a bizarre, like, this Sahula tribe, just the way that they think about the game, I find fascinating. And I don't think we'll ever get another tribe that thinks about the game in the same way. Because to me, it's bizarre to go in there. And I understand that you have to play your best game in front of the jury. But I think it's a bit weird when you're doing it. Like, look at how superior we are as an alliance, how superior and great we are. We've put this thing together where we all work together in unison. I really feel like it makes you look more obnoxious in front of the jury. And it's not necessarily going to win you any fans in this case. But like you said, quite rightfully here, you know, Rob still has all the power because he can choose where he wants to go with that. Now, what happens here is we get a confessional from Nicole, and she says that when Clint came over, he told her that she needed to do whatever she can to finish the game strong, and she now knows what she needs to do. She goes over to talk to Rob, and she says, let me fill you in on what's been happening. And she says that, you know, she hasn't been telling him up until this point of the game yet because she wanted to protect him in a weird, bizarre way. You know, because if I was Rob, I'd also, he doesn't have a choice but to believe her in any case. And she's the only one that brings this information to him. But she's now telling him, if you didn't win the immunity today, you are gone. And she said she could have gone with the females, obviously now to vote out Darrell next, who's the only guy. And it would be a great thing for women empowerment. It would be a great thing for her brand. You know, I find it interesting that we see these kinds of things on Survivor South Africa, where I'm sure these conversations are had on other versions of the show as well, but it never makes the show because in reality, I feel like it makes Nicole not look that great in this instance because it makes her look like she is only making decisions for her brand or potentially for her brand, opposed to just making real life decisions here. But clearly this is a big thing for someone like Nicole because she's got a massive following on her social media. She's been Miss South Africa and all those kind of things. So it is in the back of her head. And if you've got high celebrity type of people playing this game, I do think we see this happening on other seasons, but we probably just don't see it on TV.
Yeah, we do see a little bit of that though in Australian Survivor, with some of the champions like Commando Steve in 2018 and some of those others that really express this brand of loyalty. But you're right though, it is a strong move for Nicole to make really brand herself not only as a loyal player but also as someone that promotes female empowerment in the game. And honestly, she has done a great job at just proving how strong of a force and challenges she is to this point.
100%.
And Steffi as well has just been a beast in challenges. So I think even if you get rid of Steffi, I mean, you're still showing two young women out there that you can do, you know, whatever you want to do, whatever you set your mind to. Because at this point, Nicole and Steffi have just proven to be so strong in this game and really pushed that point. But yeah, no, it does appear because Nicole has a lot of options at this point in the game. So she can go with the all-female final three, or she can go and get rid of Jarrell and then get rid of Rob. But I think she does have this really strong connection with Rob, which I think is really, really genuine, where she says that, you know, Steffi's going against you. Let's get rid of her now and let's go to the end together with Jarrell. And the final three will just, we'll go to the end and we will go to Final Tribal Council together, the two of us, knowing we've been loyal to each other this whole game.
Yeah, and I want to add in here, instinctively, Nicole says she feels in her gut that this is the right move to do. And when you see Letitia and Steffi talking, because obviously Nicole, before she went to Rob, wanted to double check what Letitia got on the Island of Secrets, and Letitia says, I didn't get anything, and she doesn't believe that. Letitia then goes and talks to Steffi afterwards to say, hey, I've got this vote steal or vote nullifier that I can do at the end when we're in the final four. So basically it means that you and me are going to be in the final regardless because we'll vote together. So if Rob wins it, Nicole's out. So instinctively, Nicole is actually doing the right thing here to jump back to Rob because she's again going to where the numbers are going to be. She realizes that something doesn't seem right with Letitia. Letitia is not telling her everything at this point. So I take my hat off to her. Nicole played a really strong game. I think there's a few things in how she came across that didn't really translate well to the jury. And we'll talk about that, especially in the final tribal as well, and how she comes across when she gives Doral that, idol at that point. I also wanted to touch on here that we see Doral and Rob having a conversation here before they go to tribal. And Doral says that, hey, Rob, you've mentioned that I've saved you in the game before. Clearly, it's Rob doing like his reverse psychology, because obviously Doral didn't save him at any point in the game. But Doral says, hey, if you can save me this one more time, I really appreciate it. And Rob says to him, you know how you've got a joke about you voting for Steffi all the time? Just put one more vote on her. And he leaves it at that, which I just thought was a brilliant season, because Doral immediately is like, okay, it's on.
Yeah, and Rob has planted the seed with Nicole as well, telling Nicole to play her idol for Doral, and then Rob will play his for Nicole, obviously in anticipation that Letitia will also play her idol. So yeah, it does seem as though this plan to get rid of Steffi, who is really the only person at this point that seems to be going really hard against Rob, is going to be going home tonight. And that betrayal is ultimately going to, bite Steffi in the ass in the end there. And yeah, we do go into tribal council. And Doral actually makes a decision to call out the Amigos as being the final three. And he says that, it's really no secret at this point that it's going to be Nicole, Steffi, and Rob at the end together. And I mean, Rob really reinforces this and says that, Doral's going home. And everyone goes around the tribal council and they all say, yep, Doral's going home. And Rob says that Doral knows exactly what he's done.
Yeah, so I think that what he meant there, because I was looking at that as well, and I was like, what did Doral do? But I guess in his mind, the fact that Doral voted for Steffi, made him saying that Doral know what he did in this case, made Steffi feel safe with Rob at this point as well. But it is a lot of posturing here for people who know that they're not going to go home, for people who know they've got all the idols. I don't fully get, if Steffi's got something and they're trying to throw Steffi off here, it doesn't actually make sense to me at the end of the day, because, then no one goes home if everybody plays an idol. What happens? Is everything just thrown out there and you say, okay, well, we'll see you 5 in the next round and 2 people will get voted out. It would be interesting. But I do want to touch on one thing we missed prior to coming into this tribal that was smart from Rob as well, is, him putting Doral onto Steffi, and also knowing that Nicole was going to place her vote on Steffi. He knows that he can now place one vote on Letitia, just in case Letitia gets smart and she plays that idol on Steffi. Letitia will go home, which I thought was brilliant level of thinking there from Rob as well. For someone that didn't watch that many Survivor seasons coming into this, he really picked up this game while he was playing it. And they do say the best training you can get is practical hands-on training. And he's definitely been getting that over these days in the game. Now, it's quite interesting because they get to the point where they whip out all of their idols and saying, hey, we've got all the idols. We've got the bling. Rob walks behind Steffi like he's going to place it on Steffi. And he says, Nicole, do you have something to say? And Nicole stands up, or she says, let me talk, Rob. And she says her thing about, there's this whole thing about this is Nathan's idol. This is my idol. This idol belongs to people that are courageous, men that are courageous like Nathan, men that are courageous like Rob, and Doral, which is the mic drop. And she ends up putting it on Doral. So everybody plays an idol, and we see an advantage get-in type of situations, or immunity idol get-in type of situation. It worked out for us in this season, because the person still, I feel bad for Steffi, but I mean, she was going to go home regardless. So it kind of works out that she went home. But again, I hope that Survivor South Africa's producers looked at this and they thought, shit, we could have lost a Rob, or we could have lost a fan favorite at this point of the game.
And it was a very real possibility at one point, because you only look back at the final 8 when Mamba had an idol, Nicole had an idol, Rob and Jark had an idol. If those 4 idols had remained in the game and someone else had won individual immunity, then it means 5 people are safe at that point. They did run a risk there, and they really got lucky in the end that Mamba and Jark went home when they did, because otherwise those idols would still be circulating, and we would get a really an unprecedented moment in Survival where everyone would be protected, which would just be.
Did they all go to fire? Did they all do fire at the same time and see who's the last person?
And I speculated about this a little bit when I was watching the episode, and I do wonder. I think that all the idols and the immunity necklace would then get negated. That would be my understanding. And then everyone would be up for elimination there. But I mean, in the end, though, it didn't play out. I wouldn't want that. Well, I think at this point in the game, I mean, unless you go to a snap immunity challenge, maybe something like what they've done in a season like Survivor Africa, where they had this quiz about people on the jury, or something like that, would be a good way to to give someone the individual immunity necklace at that point. But even then, yeah, I think it's something we've never seen in the game before. And it really did seem like a real possibility on this season.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to touch off here. Obviously, Steffi gets voted out in this spot here. They still read the votes. Wasn't really needed. You know, Nico could have just said, there's only one person that can go home tonight. That's you, Steffi. You know, sucks to be you in this situation, but you're going home. And I do want to touch on Steffi going home here, do her eulogy for the game. You know, I think personally for me, Steffi is someone that I don't know if she'll ever play the game again. I feel like she's got so much going on outside of Survivor that she might never want to come back and play the game. She is a competitor, though, so I would love for her to take up the challenge if there was ever out there. But I would love for Steffi to come back. I would love for Steffi to come back in the same season as a Nicole or Rob, because I think her coming back in the same season as one of those, it would be rivals. She's not going to go work with Steffi, with Nicole and Rob in that season. I feel like she doesn't come across to me as someone that forgives and forgets in the game. I think she'll forgive and forget them in life, but not in the game. So I'd really love to see that dynamic play out of one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant alliance in Survivor South Africa history to come back, but this time not being on the same page. I think she's a great character. She's the type of character we look for in these shows because she's explosive. She talks her mind. Sometimes she'll come across as being controversial and people might not understand it, but I love that. I love that in a Survivor player. I think she's physically really dominant, really good player in the game, and I'm all here for it. I'm there to put my seal of approval on a Steffi return in future seasons.
Oh, a great casting choice, and she reminds me of an Alicia Calloway from the Australian Outback, maybe a little bit of a less sassy version there. Just a challenge beast, a very strong-minded player as well, and yeah, she really didn't take anything to heart, and she was really quite ruthless in her game, I suppose. And in the end there, after Nico read the votes and it became apparent that Steffi did get 2 votes against her, Rob does turn to her and say, yeah, you betrayed the Amigos, you know what you did, and you're going to pay for it ultimately. Steffi has played a great game, and when I first watched it, I was really gutted that Steffi went, because at that point I was really cheering for her, because I did recognize that Rob was playing such a dominant game, and Steffi was, at the final 6, the only person that was really going against the plan. So I remember when I first watched it, I was a little bit disappointed that she went home at that point. But obviously it was the right move to make for Rob. I mean, it does neuter another massive physical immunity threat for him, and honestly gives him a better path to the end, because I mean he's just gotten rid of the biggest strategic threat to him, and also the biggest physical threat to him as well. So it really does give him a much clearer path to the end as well. Obviously, there's no more idols in the game at this point, though. All we've got left is a vote nullifier, and how that plays out in the final 4 now will be interesting to see how that goes. It's going to be interesting to see how the finale plays out next episode. Obviously, Rob has been the most dominant player up until this point. We didn't order to be a final 3, so really he only has to win 1 immunity challenge to book his place at the final tribal council. Whereas Jarrell and Letitia haven't been as active in their moves, although Jarrell has been a player that has sort of been in a lot of alliances. He's kind of played the middle, but he's still he's played somewhat of a role in the strategy. Letitia, someone that's been more passive and really sitting around camp, hasn't made too many moves. And Nicole, obviously, at this point has been Rob's right-hand lady. And, I mean, she has made a lot of strategic moves. She has played a lot of that emotional aspect of the game, creating relationships in that way. But then again, like Rob, she's betrayed a lot of people. So to see how the finale plays out, especially with people like Rob and Nicole, who have betrayed so many people in that jury, and how they be perceived by someone like a Steffi, will be very interesting.
No, 100%. And we'll be back on this weekend to talk about the finale, the 2-hour finale, and also the reunion all in one. And we'll be closing off our coverage here on Survivor Island of Secrets. We do have quite a bit of interviews coming up over the next couple of weeks as well. We've got some Survivor South African people that will come up. We've also got an Australian Survivor that we're interviewing over the weekend, but you'll only see that closer to season 7 at the moment for Australia Survivor coming out. Season 7, you'll see that close to the premiere of that. We'll probably have the Australian one up for you guys to have a look at as well. Guys, it's been great having you as always. If you like this content, please subscribe, hit the notification bell to be informed of when we go live for future episodes. And yeah, we'll be back. Riley, is there anything else you wanted to plug there from your channel?
No, yeah, if you haven't already, just check out my channel. It's called Snuffed on YouTube. We discuss a lot about US Survivor over there. And it's actually, I think, today wrapped up filming on Survivor 41. So we should have a new season coming very soon. I believe it will premiere in September, as usual. It's been a year since Winners at War finale, which is just crazy to think that we've survived this long without Survivor. But obviously, yeah, again, Survivor South Africa, the coverage continues this weekend with the finale, and then Immunity Island coming up as well. If you haven't checked out our player draft as well, head on over to the channel. That one is there. And Chris and I dove into a lot of the players coming up in this new season. We gave our thoughts. Maybe we were a little bit too harsh, but it's well worth checking out.
100%. It's been great talking to you, Riley, and I look forward to talking to you over the weekend as well. Guys, catch you next time.